before we look at some edge targets for the Falcons, now that the dust has settled from the NFL draft, it is time to address the elephant in the room, which is Dallas Turner is not a Falcon. And despite the numerous occasions I said, and I think I even once said, he's growing fucking wings like a Falcon at this point, he was not picked by the Atlanta Falcons at pick number 8, which means I have to live up to the punishment that you, the viewers, decided would be a fair punishment if Dallas Turner was not a Falcon, which is, I think, maybe one of the better punishments in history of getting things wrong, getting absolutely smashed and obliterated and doing a drunk episode of Falcons Today. Now, I am on a little drinking hiatus, trying to lose some weight before some big life events going on in the month of May. I'm not delaying, or I'm not, fulfilling my end of the deal. It just won't be tomorrow. But we're going to have the Falcons Today drunk episode. It'll be sometime towards the end of the month, maybe sneaks into June. I promise I'm going to get it done before June. But yes, I did promise Dallas Turner would be a Falcon, and if not, I would do a drunk episode, and that's going to happen. I don't have an exact date yet, but once I do, believe me, you guys will be the first to know, and I'll be sure to publicize it on numerous occasions. Now, you could look at the history of this channel and notice that I went 0 for 3 on some big monumental offseason predictions and moves. I went pretty chalk, I will say, on all 3 of those. Bill Belichick was the leader in the clubhouse until the 11th hour. Dallas Turner was mocked to the Falcons more than any other player had ever been mocked to a team picking 8th in the history of the NFL draft. And then I also thought they'd go for Justin Fields over Kirk Cousins. So which of these right here was the biggest surprise that the Falcons didn't do? I would probably go with Dallas Turner, although that was just the mock drafters. Bill Belichick had some serious legs to it, and then at the last moment, it felt like they went 180 with Raheem Morris. So let me know down below in the comment section which of these was the biggest surprise that did not end up happening. Now, let's get into what today's show is all about, and that is edge targets for the Falcons, because I don't believe that Atlanta has sufficiently checked the box of adding and replacing their top 2 sack leaders from last season in Calais Campbell and Bud Dupree. And when you look at the Falcons' front 5, I can see where there may be some optimism about Arnold Ebiketie taking a big step forward after a solid sophomore campaign. Bralen Trice, the rookie out of Washington, can he have an impact year? Maybe Lorenzo Carter kind of gets back to the way he looked his first season with the Falcons. Grady Jarrett comes back from a torn ACL. You could try and be half glass full on this, but the reality is there's no guy on this roster that's really ever come close to sniffing 10 sacks when it comes to the edge rusher position. Now, the top leading sack returners and pass rushers from last year, Arnold Ebiketie, 6 sacks, Lorenzo Carter, 3, Harrison kind of caught fire towards the end of the season. David Onyemata proved to be a very reliable interior pass rusher, but he's still a run-first stopping guy. And when it comes to Bralen Trice, their 3rd-round pick from Washington, I'll just let history speak for itself here, which is when I looked at the last 10 edge rushers taken in round 3, Yaya Diaby from the Buccaneers last year was the only guy that got anywhere near production. Zach Harrison, 3 sacks. That's one of the best. Alex Wright for the Browns 2 years ago, 0. D'Angelo Malone had 1. The Arizona Cardinals, Myjai Sanders, he's a free agent already, 3 sacks. Ronnie Perkins, he was quickly moved on in New England. There's not a great track history of 3rd-round edge targets giving you a ton of production. So if you're in the camp of, let's put all of our eggs in the Bralen Trice basket, he's going to be awesome this year, I'm not saying you're wrong, but I'm saying history says out of the last 10, only 1 really had a productive rookie year where a team felt like they got adequate pass rushing production to satisfy maybe not going pass rusher in other spots of free agency or the draft. An addition must be made. I feel like it would be malpractice for the Atlanta Falcons to make 0 additions from here until NFL Week 1 to their pass rushing unit. It's just not good enough. The pass rushing unit has been the worst in the NFL historically, forever. And to trot out this 5 and go, we're confident, I think is a slap in the face to the fan base. So first up, we're going to look at some top free agents available. And full disclosure, it's not a great list, but that's what you get when it's May and you're looking for pass rushers. Here are the top 10 guys, in my opinion. There's a few more, but slim pickings at this point. Some recognizable names. Emmanuel Ogbah, he had some really good years with the Dolphins. He put up back-to-back 9-sack seasons. Then he got paid, and then he fell off the face of the earth, and he wasn't even a starter for Miami last year. Shaq Lawson had a good season for the Jets a few moons ago, but he missed a lot of 2023 due to injury, so maybe he's someone that the Falcons bring in for a visit. Yannick Ngakoue had a really dominant run for a handful of seasons with a variety of teams, but last year with the Bears didn't provide a lot of production, and he broke his ankle towards the end of the season. Maybe Calais Campbell comes back, although they signed and drafted a lot of guys at his position. And to me, that sounded like the door closing on a Campbell return. You got Bud Dupree, who hit the fountain of youth a little bit for the Falcons last year after getting paid by the Titans and not doing a whole lot for Tennessee, despite some really good seasons in Pittsburgh to begin his career. If you're looking at this top list of names here, the top 4 sack producing players a year ago would be Calais Campbell, Bud Dupree, Emmanuel Ogbah, and Yannick Ngakoue. So if you want to go just surface level of who had the most sacks that's still a free agent right now, these are your guys. And if I had to pick one, I would go with Bud Dupree. I do like Calais Campbell a lot, an excellent leader, but he plays more of a defensive line, 5 technique position in a 3-4 defensive front. And the Falcons have made a lot of additions to their defensive line, right? They drafted 2 defensive tackles. They signed James Smith-Williams. I feel like that's a pretty good indication as to what they want to do up front. But from an outside linebacker's perspective, I think Bud Dupree is probably your best bet at this point. 6.5 sacks a season ago. Maybe he can improve on that and build off of 2023. So which edge rusher would you sign? I gave you 10 options. Maybe it's one of those guys. Maybe it's someone else that I did not include. But let me know down below in the comment section. Now, next up, I want to run through some trade targets because Trey Hendrickson requested a trade. And there's some other guys I think could pique Atlanta's interest. So stick around for that. But first, I do want to tell all of our beautiful viewers about our sponsor today, which is Prize Picks. Daily fantasy made easy. That is the backbone of Prize Picks because all you have to do to play is pick 2 to 6 players and then choose more or less on their projected stats. Now, I want to remind everyone about the season-long stat projections I have locked in, and I invite you to play along with me. Taking the more on Kirk Cousins' passing yards, a little over 4,000. He was on track last year to demolish that number. I like the less on Jalen Hurts' passing yards. I think they're going to run it a lot more in Philly this upcoming season, which means I'll take the more on his new running back, Saquon Barkley, at a little over 1,000 yards. So if you like these projections, come play with me at Prize Picks. When you use the code CLNS, they're going to give you a deposit match up to $100. Now, I've already put all that information for you in the comments and description of today's video, but download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS for a first-time deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Now let's get into some trade targets. I spent some time combing through the web, and I was able to come up with 4 realistic-ish trade targets. Let's start with number 1, Trey Hendrickson. He requested a trade from the Cincinnati Bengals a week ago today, April 24th, in hopes of getting a long-term deal done because last offseason, they signed him to a 1-year contract extension on his already pre-existing deal worth up to $21 million, which keeps him under contract for this upcoming year, 2024, and the following season, 2025. So a little bit on the early side to be looking for an extension when you've already got 2 years left on your deal. But hey, this benefits Atlanta potentially. Now, Ben Baby, the ESPN beat reporter for the Bengals, wrote this. Lewis, that is Hendrickson's agent, said he and Hendrickson met with the Bengals in a 2-hour meeting in March to discuss the possibility of a potential trade. Hendrickson's agent said that the team is willing to discuss a potential new deal next year with his current contract set to turn through the 2025 season. in that meeting, the Bengals indicated they had no interest in trading Hendrickson. And I don't blame them. I don't see why they would have interest. It's not like he's on an expiring deal. They have him on a 2-year remaining contract, and he's been super productive ever since he came over from New Orleans and started in Cincinnati in 2021. Look at the numbers he's put up. 14 sacks, 8 sacks, 17 and a half sacks a season ago. They are trying to maximize the Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins window, and Hendrickson's got 2 years left on his deal. So from a broke boy standpoint, which is the Cincinnati Bengals entire regime, they feel like they have a pretty fair contract in place for Hendrickson. And to be honest, they kind of have a good point. He's got 2 years left, and they gave him a deal up to $21 million last offseason. So they're not looking to move on from a guy they just gave some extra money to less than 12 months ago. But Hendrickson has been one of the best pass rushers, even though he may not be a household name, although he's quietly rising the ranks. Like, since 2020, the last year with New Orleans, to today, he's third in sacks. He's only 5 sacks behind Myles Garrett, the reigning Defensive Player of the Year, head of Hassan Reddick, head of Nick Bosa. To me, this signifies 2 things. 1, great pass rushing skills. The sacks are pretty evident of that. And 2, excellent availability. I mean, what's the best ability? Availability. So you know that you're going to be paying for a guy that's going to play almost the entire season, if not all 17 games. This is the number 1 target by a mile for the Falcons. They should be on the phone every single morning with Cincinnati. They should be blowing up the cell towers in Southern Ohio, Northern Kentucky until a deal gets done. Trey Hendrickson has to be Terry Fontenot's number 1 priority until the season kicks off. So here's what I think a trade could look like. Hendrickson to the Falcons for a 2025 third-round draft pick. I'm sure the Bengals would want more, but once word gets out that a player wants to be traded, a team loses a lot of leverage. So he's probably worth more like a second than a third, but some leverage has been lost now that Hendrickson has gone public that he wants a trade if a new contract cannot be put in place. So would you do this trade? Type T for trade, type P for pass. I almost want to give myself a medal for going this long in the video without mentioning the 8th overall pick in the draft. But despite not going edge rusher in round number 1, if they were to get Hendrickson, I would feel a whole lot better about the entire Falcons 2024 draft. Hendrickson trade is kind of comboed into that. Next guy up is Indianapolis Colts defensive end Tyquan Lewis. Now, he's more of a defensive end in a 3-4 front, and I'm not quite sure exactly schematically how perfect the fit would be, but there's not a lot of great other options out there. Now, he was a second-round pick out of Ohio State back in 2018. Last year for the Colts, 25 tackles, 4 sacks, 9 tackles for loss. He wasn't a starter for Indianapolis. He was a rotational defensive end, and they just drafted Laiatu Latu, who does not play the same position as Lewis, but they may feel a lot more comfortable with moving on from Lewis since they added another pass rusher. So this could be a name to keep an eye on, with the Colts adding a whole bunch of pass rushers since drafting Lewis. Next one up is Buffalo Bills edge rusher Von Miller. Of course, the longtime Denver Bronco future Hall of Famer, inked a huge contract with the Bills just a few years ago, and after 2 seasons in Buffalo, it's already going downhill. Last year, he played in 12 games. He had a whopping 3 tackles. That's all. No tackles for loss, no sacks. Played 32% of the snaps. He was a healthy scratch at stages. He had some run-ins with the law during the bye week in his hometown of Arlington, Texas. There are some question marks surrounding Von Miller, but a trade after June 1 would free up some cap space for the Buffalo Bills, and his base salary, which Atlanta would be on the hook for mostly, is pretty low, actually. So if the Falcons feel like, hey, there's still some good football left in a future Hall of Famer who just 2 seasons ago in 2022 put up 8 sacks in 12 games before tearing his ACL, maybe they feel like a year plus removed from that injury and they can get back to the way he looked like his last year in Denver in 2021 before he got traded to the Rams. And remember, he was a huge part of the Rams Super Bowl run. He was dominant in the postseason. He was the one that got to Tom Brady in the fourth quarter of that Rams-Bucks playoff game to secure the win for LA. So this could be someone where I could see the Bills being content to move on from and get that contract off their books for the most part. And for the Falcons, at this stage in the game, like it's May, you're not going to find a great option. And then we've got Sam Williams to wrap up our trade targets, the Dallas Cowboy defensive end. He was a second-round pick in 2022 out of Ole Miss. Last year for the Cowboys, 4.5 sacks, 5 tackles for loss. He was not a starter for Dallas. He was a rotational guy. He played less than 30% of the snaps. I talked to our Cowboys beat reporter or insider, if you will, Chat Sports host Tom Downey, about the possibility of Sam Williams being traded. And he said if he kind of gets in Mike Zimmer, the new DC in Dallas's doghouse in training camp, which if you know Sam Williams and you know his background, that's not impossible. Maybe you see a trade go down during training camp if the Falcons are like, all right, we're going to be patient. We're going to trust the guys that we've already brought in. And if after one preseason game, it is very obvious that this is not a sufficient group, then we'll pick up the phone and call Dallas. So I think this could be a trade that if it were to happen, it wouldn't be tomorrow or next week. It could be in August. Now, will the Falcons add an edge rusher? Yes or no? Do you feel like Atlanta is looking at their unit going, you know what? We've got a good new defensive-minded coach. We've got a new DC in place, although the last DC was really, really good. We don't need to add anyone. We like the guys we've signed. We like the guys we've drafted. And we like the guys that are coming up our farm system right now, like Arnold Ebiketie and Malone and Lorenzo Carter. And we're going to stick with our core, the most Dallas Cowboys thing in the world. Yes or no to whether or not Atlanta adds an edge rusher. Before we sign off, I just want to show some love to Ryan Price, who sent in a super thanks on the channel. Everyone spam Ryan down below if you're still watching right now. Help me wish and show some love to Ryan Price for supporting Falcons today. And that will do it for us on today's show. Ryan, really appreciate you going above and beyond to support us here on the channel. And if you want to get on screen like Ryan did, super thanks, and we'll throw it on to a future episode of Falcons Today.